The coffee pot hissed softly in the near-empty diner as Jenna Marsh wiped down the same section of counter for the third time. Marsh's diner, tucked at the edge of Crestville, Wyoming, had seen better days. Days when the factory workers filled the booths and the Friday night crowd spilled out onto the street. Now, the only sound was the occasional clink of a spoon in a coffee cup and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Jenna sighed, glancing at the wall clock. Almost 2 p.m., and barely enough in the till to cover the morning's deliveries. The door creaked, open. Jenna looked up, instantly alert. A massive man stepped in, the sunlight framing his silhouette. Black leather vest, worn jeans, heavy boots. His face was lined, his gray beard rough, and across his chest, unmistakable, the snarling skull emblem of the Hell's Guardians, a biker group that had long sparked nervous whispers in small towns across the region. Jenna's regulars froze. Old Ernie Tabb tensed at his corner stool. The Thompsons, a retired couple in the back booth, exchanged glances. Jenna saw it all. She felt the tension wrap around the room like a rope. The biker hesitated. Just inside the doorway, eyes scanning the room. His name, Jenna would later learn, was Clay Mercer. But now he was just a stranger, one carrying the weight of a reputation stitched onto his vest. Jenna forced her shoulders back and grabbed a menu. "Afternoon? Table or counter?" she asked, her voice calm. Clay gave a slow nod and eased himself onto a stool at the far end of the counter. His fingers, thick, scarred, drummed lightly on the countertop. "Coffee," he rumbled, his voice surprisingly quiet. "And whatever's fastest. Been on the road since before dawn." Jenna poured the coffee, watching him out of the corner of her eye. His hands trembled faintly. There was a hospital band half hidden under his cuff. His eyes, pale and bloodshot, were the eyes of a man worn thin. The bell above the door jingled again. 2 local sheriff's deputies walked in, boots loud on the floor. Deputy Bill Kearns, known for his big mouth, and his partner, Deputy Lyle Harris. "Well, well," Kearns drawled, stepping up beside Clay. "Don't see many of your type around here. Looking for trouble, big man?" Jenna's chest tightened. Clay kept his eyes on his coffee. "Just getting a meal," Kearns smirked, looking over at Jenna. "Check his ID, Jenna. You know we've got bulletins on these biker gangs. Could be one of the bad ones." Jenna set the coffee pot down a little too hard. "He's a customer, Bill," she said evenly. Clay slowly reached into his jacket. Kearns's hand twitched toward his holster. "That's enough," Jenna said, stepping between them. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her voice stayed steady. "He ordered coffee and breakfast. Let him eat." Kearns's face hardened. "Careful, Jenna. Your old man wouldn't want you siding with guys like this." Jenna's hands trembled, but she met his stare. "My father taught me to treat people by how they act, not what they wear. Are you ordering something or just here to pick a fight?" For a long beat, no one spoke. Then Kearns gave a thin smile. "Suit yourself." He tossed a few bills on the counter and left, Lyle following close behind. The diner seemed to breathe again. Clay looked up at Jenna, a quiet gratitude flickering in his tired eyes. "Thanks," he said softly. "Most people just turn away." Jenna gave a small, tight smile. "Most people don't know how to make coffee right either." Clay let out a faint chuckle, then quietly added, "It's for my boy. Hospital in Cheyenne. Cancer, stage 4. He's been holding on, but—" His voice trailed off. Jenna's throat tightened. She turned, calling the order into the kitchen. She didn't ask any more questions. She just did what she always did. Kept the coffee coming, the plates full, and her heart open. By the time Clay left, he slipped a $20 bill under his plate. "For the kindness," he said simply. Jenna watched him go, her mind still replaying the tense confrontation with the deputies. She thought it would end there, a quiet moment, gone like dust in the Wyoming wind. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, Jenna unlocked the diner's door just after dawn, expecting the usual slow start. But something was off. Taped to the front window was a crude sign, written in thick red marker. "No biker lovers. Not welcome in Crestville." Jenna's stomach dropped. She yanked the paper down, crumpling it in her fist. Her hands shook, but not. From fear. From anger. This was her family's diner, the place her father built from nothing, and she had done nothing wrong. She served coffee. She served breakfast. She treated people like human beings. Inside, the air felt heavier. The early regulars trickled in, but something in their eyes told Jenna they'd seen the sign. By noon, the lunch crowd was thin. Ernie still came by, giving her an awkward pat on the shoulder. The Thompsons slid into their usual booth but kept glancing at the door. Jenna overheard snippets of conversation. Trouble with the police. Defending one of those gangmen. Her chest tightened. It was one thing to stand up in the moment, but small towns had long memories. Jenna knew she was already marked. She stared at the empty seats, calculating silently. How long could she keep the doors open if the town turned? Its back on her? Around 1 p.m., the bell jingled. A tall man in his 50s, broad-shouldered but dressed in plain jeans and a simple leather jacket, stepped in. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed. A woman followed close behind. Silver. Hair tied back in a braid, sharp gray eyes. Jenna Marsh? The man asked, his voice low but kind. She nodded warily. I'm Thomas Mercer. This is my wife, Louise. The name sparked recognition. Mercer. Clay Mercer? Thomas gave a small smile. My younger brother. Louise stepped forward, taking Jenna's hand gently. He told us what you did yesterday, standing up to those deputies. He wanted to come himself, but he's still at the hospital with Eli, his son. Jenna's throat tightened again. How is Eli? Thomas's face darkened slightly. Fighting. That's all we can ask. He took a breath. But that's not why we're here. We wanted to thank you, Jenna. Not just with words. Jenna frowned. I don't need anything. Really. Louise's eyes softened. We figured you might say that. She glanced out the window. But you might want to take a look outside. Jenna followed their gaze. At first, she didn't understand what she was seeing. Down the road, a low rumble. Faint, but growing louder by the second. Dozens of motorcycles, their chrome catching the sunlight, rolling slowly into town. Then, more, from the other direction. The deep growl of engines filled the air as wave after wave of bikers appeared, filling both sides of the street. They lined up outside the diner, shutting off their engines and pulling off their helmets. Jenna's jaw fell open. There had to be 100, no, more, maybe 200 riders. Men, women, young, old, patches from the Hell's Guardians. Yes, but also others. Local riding clubs, independent bikers, even families on big touring bikes. Thomas clapped a hand on her shoulder. Word spreads fast in the biker world. You treated Clay like a man when others saw a patch. That matters. Louise smiled warmly. And they've been riding all morning. I imagine they're hungry. Jenna stood frozen, heart pounding, as the first riders pushed through the door. Big men with lined faces, women in braided leather, young riders with nervous smiles. The leader, a tall man with a braided beard and mirrored sunglasses, approached. Miss Marsh? Yes, I'm Mike, president of the Wyoming Guardians. Chapter. Clay's one of ours. We heard what you did. He held out a thick envelope. Suppliers should be here in 10 with a food drop. It's covered. We're here to eat, support, and make sure no one in this town gives you grief again. Jenna took the envelope with trembling hands. I don't even know what to say. Mike smiled. Say you've got enough coffee brewing. We're thirsty. Jenna let out a shaky laugh, the tension inside her breaking like a cracked dam. Outside, more riders arrived, parking in neat rows. People from town gathered on the sidewalks, eyes wide, whispering. Even Deputy Harris appeared, his radio in hand, looking stunned. As the diner filled, Jenna felt something shift, not just in her little restaurant, but in the air of the whole town. And she had no idea that the real climax of the day hadn't even arrived yet. Inside Marsh's diner, every seat was filled. The small space buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of coffee mugs. Jenna worked behind the counter in a blur, pouring coffee, calling orders to the kitchen, sliding plates down to the waitresses she'd called in last minute. Her heart was still pounding. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected any of it. Bikers lined the booths and the counter, some even sitting on the window ledges or standing near the walls, chatting with locals who'd cautiously drifted in. Townspeople like Ernie Tabb and the Thompsons were wide-eyed but warming up, drawn in by the surprising warmth of the gathering. At the center of it all, Jenna saw Mike, the chapter president, coordinating everything with easy authority. He made sure the bikers were polite, patient, and respectful. And they were. Every customer paid in cash. Every tip jar overflowed. And then, just as Jenna thought the afternoon might settle into a steady rhythm, the front door swung open. There, framed by the sunlight, stood Clay Mercer. He looked tired, more tired than the day before, but his face carried a lightness Jenna hadn't seen. "Hope you don't mind me joining the crowd," he said, a slow smile pulling at the corner of his mouth. Jenna felt her breath catch. "Clay," she said softly, stepping out from behind the counter. He walked toward her, moving a little stiffly. "Eli's stable. The treatment's working. First good news we've had in weeks." His voice broke slightly. Without thinking, Jenna stepped forward and hugged him. Clay stiffened in surprise, then wrapped his arms around her gently. When they pulled apart, Clay smiled. "He wants to meet you someday," said his old man told him about the lady who stood up to the cops. Jenna laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I'm just doing what anyone should do." Clay's eyes softened. "You'd be surprised how rare that is." Just then, Mike called out for attention. The room hushed. Mike raised his voice, his deep tone carrying easily over the crowd. "I want everyone here and everyone in this town to know something. Marsh's Diner, from this day forward, it's under the protection of the Guardians." A cheer erupted. Dozens of bikers raised their mugs, grinning and slapping the tables. Mike turned to the locals who'd gathered awkwardly near the entrance, people who'd been peeking in with uncertain faces. "That means no more threats, no more harassment. No one lays a finger on this place without going through us." His voice hardened for just a moment before his grin returned. "Now, I hear the pie here's legendary. Who's ready for dessert?" The room erupted again, and Jenna couldn't help but laugh, wiping a tear from her cheek. Outside, the rumble of parked motorcycles filled the air. On the sidewalk, more townspeople had gathered, watching the strange, beautiful sight. A little diner once on the edge of collapse, now glowing with life, protected not by wealth or influence, but by the loyalty of people who understood what it meant to stand up when it counted. Jenna's mind raced as she grabbed another stack of plates. She still had no idea how long this would last, whether the town's anger would fade or whether the biker crowd would keep coming. But for the first time in months, she felt hope, real, solid hope, settle into her chest. And as Clay sat quietly at the counter, sipping his coffee, Jenna realized something else. This wasn't just about saving the diner. This was about proving something to the town, to herself, and maybe even to the world. That you don't have to be powerful or famous or fearless to do the right thing. You just have to decide that when the moment comes, you won't look away. The sun dipped, lower, casting long golden streaks across Crestville's narrow streets. From the window, Jenna could see the shimmer of chrome under the late-day light, motorcycles parked in rows, some riders still standing around chatting, others helping neighbors carry bags, or laughing with local kids who came to admire the bikes. Inside Marsh's Diner, the energy had shifted. It wasn't just bikers anymore. By late afternoon, more locals had begun filtering in, their initial nervousness softening into hesitant curiosity. Jenna watched as old Mrs. Thompson struck up a conversation with a biker in a denim vest covered in patches, her hands gesturing animatedly as she told stories about the old days. Ernie Tabb, who'd always been grumpy about outsiders, was now clapping a biker on the back, the two of them deep in talk about old engines and long-forgotten car models. Even the town's mayor, a nervous-looking man named Gregory Shaw, wandered in, glancing around as if unsure whether he was allowed. Mike. The Wyoming Guardians chapter president gave him a firm handshake. Good to see you, Mayor. Join us. Jenna worked fast behind the counter, barely pausing for breath. Louise Mercer helped, bringing out extra trays, refilling coffee pots, making sure Jenna drank water between orders. At one point, Jenna slipped into the back to grab more supplies. She leaned against the walk-in cooler for a second, pressing her hands to her face. Her heart pounded, her arms ached, her legs screamed. But she was smiling. Who would have thought? One act of decency, one refusal to back down, had built this moment. A knock at the back door made her jump. She opened it cautiously. Deputy Lyle Harris stood there, hat in hand, looking sheepish. "Jenna," he began awkwardly. "I just, wanted to say, sorry for how yesterday went down." Jenna blinked. "Lyle, you didn't—" "I didn't stop Brennan," Lyle interrupted, his voice tight. "Didn't speak up. Should've." He rubbed the back of his neck. "And now, well, town's buzzing, Brennan's fuming, but I just want you to know, not all of us are looking to stir trouble. Some of us just want things calm." Jenna felt a warmth bloom in her chest. She gave him a small, tired smile. "Thanks, Lyle. I appreciate that." He nodded once, then turned to leave, his boots crunching on the gravel. When Jenna returned to the front, she nearly tripped over two small kids peeking in through the door, their eyes wide as they stared at the sea of bikers. "Are you guys having a party?" one of them asked, her voice filled with wonder. Jenna laughed softly. "Kind of," she said. "Come on in, sweetie. Want a lemonade?" The girl beamed, pulling her little brother by the hand as they stepped inside. By evening, the entire block felt transformed. A portable grill had appeared outside, no one quite knew who'd brought it, and bikers were helping cook overflow meals to keep everyone fed. Music played faintly from someone's speaker, and laughter echoed down the street. Clay Mercer found Jenna during a brief lull. "She wants to meet you," he said quietly, referring to his son, Eli. Said his old man told him about the lady. "With the backbone of steel?" Jenna chuckled, a little embarrassed. "I'd like that," she said softly. Clay gave a small nod, his eyes glinting. "You know, you didn't just serve coffee, Jenna. You reminded a whole town what respect looks like." Outside, the rumble of engines picked up as another group of bikers arrived, their headlights cutting through the dusk. Inside, the diner lights glowed warm and steady, casting soft shadows across the faces of strangers who had, in a few short hours, become something more. Not just customers, not just outsiders or locals, but a community, built on a simple but powerful truth. How you treat someone matters. Night had fully settled over Crestville, but Marsh's diner was brighter and louder than it had been in years. Outside, the rows of motorcycles glistened under the streetlights, chrome, reflecting the glow like stars scattered on the pavement. Inside, the clatter of dishes mixed with bursts of laughter, the deep rumble of conversations, and the occasional cheer when someone cracked a joke or told an old story. Jenna stood behind the counter, breathless. She wiped her hands on her apron, heart still racing from the whirlwind of the day. Louise Mercer had taken over the register, smiling warmly at each guest, and Thomas was helping stack plates and clear tables. The night had become something Jenna never imagined, not just a rush of business or a flood of bikers, but a full-scale community event. Locals had begun to blend in, pulled by curiosity, food, or maybe just the sheer energy in the air. A group of teenagers sat with two riders who were swapping road stories. The mayor himself had pulled up a chair next to Mike, the biker chapter president, sipping coffee while discussing local town improvements. Even Ernie Tabb was sitting side by side with a heavily tattooed biker named Sandy, the two of them laughing over old war memories. Jenna caught her reflection in the window for a moment, flushed face, tired eyes, apron dusted with flour, and yet she smiled. This was the heart of her father's dream. Not just a diner, but a place where people crossed lines, shared tables, and left their assumptions at the door. The bell above the door jingled again, and Deputy Bill Kearns stepped in. The noise in the room dropped a notch. Conversation slowed, eyes turned. Jenna's heart clenched for a beat. Kearns scanned the room, his jaw tight, his gaze skipping over the bikers, the locals, the mayor, all tangled together in this unexpected gathering. He walked up to the counter, his boots slow and deliberate on the floor. Jenna held her ground. Kearns cleared his throat. "Black coffee," he said shortly. Jenna poured the cup silently, sliding it over. He took it, paused, then set a few crumpled bills on the counter. "Good luck keeping the peace, Marsh," he muttered. "This town's watching." Then he turned, coffee in hand, and left. Jenna let out a slow breath. Clay appeared at her side, his quiet presence like a shield. "You stood up once," he said softly, "and you've been standing ever since." Jenna gave a small, tired laugh. "Feels like I'm standing on a tightrope." Clay's expression softened. "You've got more people holding that rope than you think?" Across the diner, Mike raised his mug, catching Jenna's eye. "To Marsh's Diner," he called out, voice booming. "The best damn place in Wyoming." A cheer erupted. Bikers, locals, everyone joining in. For the first time. All day, Jenna let herself laugh freely. She raised a coffee pot in mock salute, grinning as the room roared with applause. Outside, the rumble of motorcycles was steady but calm, the kind of sound that settled into the bones of the town like a heartbeat. Jenna turned back to Clay. "Eli's really doing better?" Clay nodded, emotion tightening his throat. "First good news in months." He hesitated. "He's got a long road, but he's got a shot now." Jenna's chest warmed. "Tell him I said hi." Clay smiled faintly. "I will, and he'll be here one day to meet you." As the night stretched on, Jenna worked alongside her new friends, moving through the crowd with a lightness she hadn't felt in years. The weight of overdue bills, the fear of an empty diner, the loneliness of holding a family legacy alone. All of it seemed for now held at bay by something stronger. The unshakable power of kindness returned. By midnight, as the last cups were filled and the last plates cleared, Jenna knew this wasn't the end of something. It was the start. The clock over the counter struck 1 a.m., and Marsh's Diner finally began to quiet. Outside, bikes rumbled softly as riders prepared to leave, their headlights flickering to life one by one. The air smelled faintly of coffee, grilled food, and the cooling summer night. Inside, the last handful of customers sat finishing up, a few locals, some bikers lingering over one last cup, and Jenna standing at the counter, her apron slung. Over her shoulder, hair messy, exhaustion carved into every inch of her face. But she was smiling. Louise Mercer leaned across the counter. "You need sleep, honey." Jenna gave a tired laugh. Yeah, I just don't want to forget any of this." Thomas Mercer joined them, wiping his hands on a rag. "We'll remember, Jenna. So will everyone else." Jenna gazed around at her worn little diner. She thought about the morning when the cruel sign had been taped to her window. She thought about the fear that had sat heavy on her chest all day. Fear of losing the diner, of being shunned, of watching her father's legacy collapse because she'd made the wrong choice. And now, here she was, standing in the aftermath of something no one in Crestville would forget. Clay approached, moving slowly, his heavy boots silent on the old wooden floor. He reached into his jacket and handed Jenna a carefully wrapped package. She frowned, unwrapping it gently. Inside was a leather vest, black, soft, custom-stitched. Across the back, Marsh's Diner in bold lettering. Surrounding it, friends. Of the Guardians. Pinned to the front was a small note, the handwriting rough but deliberate. "For the bravest diner owner we know. Eli's doing better. He can't wait to meet you. Clay." Jenna's throat tightened. She blinked fast, pressing the vest to her chest. "I can't," she began, but Clay raised a hand, stopping her. "You can," he said softly. "And you did. You stood up when it mattered. Not many people do." Mike, the chapter president, stepped forward. "We'll be back through, Jenna. Regular rides, regular stops. And if anyone in this town gives you trouble, well," he gave a slow grin, "let's just say they'll have to answer to a few hundred friends." Jenna laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. As the bikers began filing out, They offered quiet thanks, handshakes, promises to return. Outside, engines revved gently as one by one. The motorcycles rolled off into the night. When the last one was gone, the town fell into a deep, hushed calm. Jenna locked the diner door, leaned her forehead against the glass, and let herself breathe. In the distance, she could still hear the faint echo of engines, the sound of loyalty, of respect, of unexpected friendships forged over coffee and eggs, and the simple refusal to back down. She turned and looked around the empty diner, smiling, faintly. She hung the leather vest on the wall right next to her father's old apron. The next morning, when the sun rose over Crestville, people walking past Marsh's diner would see something new in the window. Not just a bustling business, but a place transformed, protected, and honored by a brotherhood that didn't forget kindness. And Jenna? She learned that sometimes one small act of courage can ripple through an entire town, through an entire community, and come back to you in ways you never imagined. Because in the end, it's not about the size of your fight. It's about the size of your heart. And Jenna Marsh had shown the world just how big hers was. If you love this story, hit that like button and subscribe to Tales Unveiled. Check out the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss it. See you there.